Hello, welcome to the BYOBand.org podcast, episode 9, Utopian Societies. In today's episode, we will discuss the significance of an ideal utopian society, their purpose in reality, relationships to humanity, and the effects they could have on a modern society.
BYOB.
Hello, my name is Andrew Riefenstahl. Welcome to the BYOBand.org podcast. In tonight's episode, or today's, depending on when you're listening and where you're at, we are discussing the Utopian Society. We got a lot of people here tonight. It's a big cast tonight. Take a second, talk about yourself, express yourself here. We'll go clockwise.
Max Mondini. Where are we starting now? Anyway, yeah, Max Mondini, and a little local band in Austin. Just living here with a couple of friends.
What's up, guys? I'm Brent Beesing. I've been living in Austin for about 3 years now, but about to move to Denver, Colorado. And I like to shred boards. It's fun.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Zach. I'm a student here at UT in Austin, just living life and loving it, you know?
I'm Amber Janeski, and I live in Austin, Texas as well.
Hey, what's up? I'm Sam Harrell. I am an Austin musician here in the great city of Austin. Also a student at UT. Definitely looking forward to this higher intellectual conversation on utopian societies.
So I'm going to read a quick definition. This is what I found on, I won't release my sources, you can go to the blog, www.byoband.org. Utopia, a society that possesses highly desirable or nearly perfect qualities, egalitarian principles of equality in economics, government, and justice. What does that mean to us at this table? Someone like to start off?
I'll start off. So I'll preface this with saying that I listened to a podcast on a nice walk today because the weather was beautiful, guys. Come on. It was a podcast actually from 1999 by Melvin Bragg of the In Our Time series on BBC. And they covered all types of stuff. But basically they were like, utopia originally means nowhere. It's a Greek word and it means nowhere, which I think is fascinating because I don't think utopians are attainable. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you guys say. But right off the front, a little bit of a sardonic view, but it's a Greek word for nowhere, and I think there might be some truth to that.
So you were just talking about that being unattainable, and this thought occurred to me, and I've had this thought before, just to kind of set the frame. The Greeks believed obviously that utopian societies were not necessarily attainable. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at all, or sardonic necessarily. I think it speaks to a higher truth about humans, which is the fact that we are an idealistic species. We have the capacity to idealize about the future and set up these concepts of perfection or perfect society. I think that that's been pretty critical to human success and achievement because without ideals, we wouldn't necessarily have something to strive for to better our reality. And so, innovations and progress, the concept of human progress, is really just a human striving for an ideal or a utopia, if you will. Whether or not the utopia is actually achievable or attainable, perhaps not even really the question. It's what kind of advancements do we make as a human species because of our idea of utopia.
I definitely think it's good that we have goals, and we set those goals whether they are ideal and attainable or not. I think that it's important as a human, or I guess the whole human society, anthropologically speaking, we push ourselves to reach that model, that pinnacle, paragon of success,
A friendly tower is under attack.
I'm sorry.
No, go for it, man.
No, I think if you look around, we don't live in a perfect society. There's clear flaws that, people get frustrated about. People have, bitch and moan about their jobs and the stuff they have to do to get by, to pay bills. And I started thinking about, well, I'm really visual. So if I see something, I started looking at artists that actually draw what a utopian society would look like. And so once I started seeing like, oh, like that's could actually happen. Like, you know, they're pretty futuristic looking, but at the same time, they're like ecologically like imbalanced, and they're really pretty and have tons of green space. And so like I got really inspired. I was like, man, like if, you know, that could be a potential, you know, future, a potential reality, you know, what would my mindset be like in that, you know, if I were to place myself like in that society, like what would I be thinking about? What would my like concerns be? Like, would I have the same worries or problems? And so like the more I started to think about, you know, what that would imply living in that type of society, and I was like, well, what if I could adopt that mindset now, even though like, you know, the surroundings, like we're not there yet, but if you can adopt that mindset, then maybe you can kind of cause some shifts in your own personal life that could, you know, potentially reflect. And then if more people kind of did that, then, you know, maybe we could get some serious momentum going.
Some progress towards those ideal goals.
Yeah. But I think the visual thing was what really was like, whoa, dude, like that looks fucking awesome. Like seeing pictures of like a utopian, like a futuristic utopian society, and there's like these high-speed light rails everywhere, and like just fucking like you can just jump on a, you know, wherever, like everything's free, like you're just like everyone's just like healthy and thriving, and it's like, dude, that's like, it's really cool art. Like if you ever get a chance to like just Google like utopian, like futuristic art or like society or whatever, there's tons of cool stuff. Like a bunch of artists are into it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. What you were saying, like you look at yourself and you find the things that you want in society, because at the end of the day, we are a society. You know, if everyone had that mindset, then the entire world would change, because we are the world. So I think that is the first step. Like everyone just has to try to find a balance on all of these levels, and I think that's what like utopia is perfect balance between like justice and equality and rights and all of these things, like progress, like with capitalism versus like saving the environment and not exploiting. Because I think the big problem that is preventing our society from achieving utopia is capitalism, which has brought us to so many great places. It is built on exploitation, whether it be from the environment or the people who build our iPhones in China that are making like dirt wages, you know? There's exploitation on all levels. So we need to find that perfect balance between progress and saving the rights and, you know, the environment as well.
That, I kind of want to piggyback off of that, speaking of capitalism. I feel like whenever you think about the term utopia and what it means, you kind of touched on something that I think is really interesting whenever it comes to a perfect balance between, you know, economics and culture and society and government and or lack thereof, if that's the case. And I want to pose the question: do you guys think that not capitalism, that a utopia can exist without communism? Because in a lot of worlds, in a lot of realms, speaking of particularly Marxist realms, communism kind of tries in its purest form to achieve that. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Do you think it can exist with or without it?
I definitely think that communism is at the root, and it's a good root to have in a utopian society. That would be my stance on it for sure. I like the idea of capitalism. I think I was more in love with it when I was younger. But, you know, when you can see where it starts to, like, become overly specialized in one small group of people and oligarchy forms, it's problematic. Communism, you know, I don't know how you particularly look at that word, but I know in our culture it has a negative connotation, but I think it's a positive thing, and it should definitely be incorporated in some way into the roots of utopian societies.
Yeah, and I think that in a utopian society that's advanced that far and technology has gotten to such a high level that everything that people have access to is going to be just whatever technology has to offer at that point. So it's going to be like the highest level of like, it's just going to be preference. Like if it's a truly utopian society, it's just going to be like picking, this type of, whatever, like a TV or a car or whatever. It's just going to be picking your, like, everything. I imagine everything it just being like, versus these companies like Samsung versus Panasonic versus, whatever. Everything's just going to be modular, and you're just going to pick like, oh, I want these specs and these, whatever, based on like what you want. And it's just, that's, and there's not going to be this like crazy, like, I guess some people say that competition drives innovation, which, I definitely understand that argument. So,
well, just quick, but why can't a competitive environment exist, in perhaps a greater realm? Speaking about communism, I'm sure there's different words and different things that we could use to describe that sort of society, but we all understand, like, basically what that would be. It would basically be some kind of equal opportunity for all humans, and, like, seriously equal opportunity to survive and equal opportunity to be taken care of, I guess, in basic ways, which could be defined, but we don't have to. But anyway, so speaking of innovation, like, but why couldn't there be a competitive environment also within that, specifically for driving, and always asking, what can we be doing better? What can we be doing, better than whatever?
Yeah, and I think when people have access to all those things, the innovation will skyrocket, because then all these like great minds that maybe didn't have an opportunity to, it'll be, everyone will have access. Like, oh, you think you can figure something out? Like, here you go, like, figure it out, and then make it better. Everyone will constantly be kind of like working. It'll be more of like a cooperative, goal to kind of just,
Yeah, I want to add one more thing. The closest thing I've seen, it's going to sound kind of funny, but the closest thing I've seen in our society close to like utopian kind of mindset, like compared to any like other companies I've seen, is Brent introduced me to the snowboard movie called, what was it? Internal Snowboarding?
Oh. Oh, the eternal beauty of snowboarding.
Yeah, eternal beauty of snowboarding. And literally every single year they go to different mountains, different like places to snowboard, and they build the same jump every single year, and they edit a video, and I guess like the competitive part in it is like getting your trick better from last year or something like that. But every single year they literally sit down together at a table, play cards like Uno and like video games, and then they just go out the next morning and like build their jumps and spend hours on building it, and then they like knock out all their tricks. And it's like super creative process, and it was like, there's more in the video, but it's like really inspiring video.
This is your ideal utopia.
No, I was just touching base on like something in this actual world that's like close, because also I think in a utopian society it would be cool to have, I guess everybody might think that like the flow, like the mind, or like flows, what is it? Flow state of, flow states, like flow state of mind or whatever.
Ooh, what's
and
that?
So
Yeah, what is that?
That's, well, that was on a podcast that Brent listened to.
So there's a really cool book called The Rise of Superman, and it's all about flow states and how they affect human performance and consciousness. And they do a lot of studies on action sports athletes, since action sports athletes are constantly putting themselves in life or death situations, so they're hyper aware in the moment, because if they make one wrong move they could die. So it's a really cool book. It just talks about how beneficial flow states can be and how they can elevate humans to like the peak.
It's pretty much like
performance.
But what is a flow state?
It's like a form of meditation.
So flow state is
cool.
anytime you're hyper aware, like hyper in the moment, like super intense in the moment.
Yeah, it probably has a lot to do with like certain, like you've heard of alpha or theta brain waves. Like if you were to like put like your brain on some kind of machine, it'd be like your heart rate and your brain waves are probably like in some equal pattern, electrically speaking. And yeah, you're just hyper focused, you're hyper conscious, which is like a function of like your neocortex and your brain. That's what makes us human. It's like the prefrontal cortex.
I just want to say really quick that it is just awesome that we can literally explain things like that, like in scientific terms. You know, you think 200 years ago, they didn't know shit about the brain, and now we're figuring out how to like unlock its true potential, you know? Because that could be a huge part of utopian society as well. Like, I mean, I know the quote is kind of misused that we only use 10 or 20% of our brain, but I think it's true to some extent. There are portions of it that we have not either fully developed or truly unlocked, and they could really help us grow as a species, and rise to a higher plane of existence because, you're using more of your brain.
Just because, we're talking about utopian, and so we're talking about progress, the future, we're talking about advancing, and because we're talking about our species as humans, we are humans, and so, implicitly what that implies is that we're going to be continuing to evolve, and the reason we don't live in a utopian society is because we're only experiencing, you could argue, this is maybe sort of a more psychedelic level to take this to, but we're only experiencing the current state of consciousness that we've been able to evolve up into this point. So that's why we're living in the sort of society we are, because it's a manifestation of the human conscious mind in this civilization, with more time and perhaps more conscious energy and putting into these things. Maybe we get groups of maybe company training, instead of company training being teaching you how to do dumb shit at some company. Maybe company training also involves higher consciousness meditation or focus or something like that. What if you got masses of people being tuned in? You know what I'm saying? You take
LSD.
Or all tripping.
also known as.
Quit beating around the bush. Let's get these kids on acid, Anyway, I think you know where I was going with that. So, so just to wrap that up real quick, I think that utopian society and advancement almost definitely implies humans stepping up our game in terms of conscious awareness and using our minds for I'm not talking about some weird trippy cognitive. I'm just saying being more conscious humans.
Empathy,
basic shit like that.
Yeah.
I think the whole idea that you need to wait for things to get to this point in order to start living, because like this movie that Max is talking about, The Eternal Beauty of Snowboarding, these guys really are living a utopian lifestyle. They're pretty much doing what they love all year round. They're snowboarding, they're filming, they're hanging out with their friends, and they're happy. They might not make the most money, but the lifestyle and the life that they're living is awesome. They're out in nature, they're out in the mountains, they're pushing themselves to progress at their chosen sport. And I think we as individuals can live a lifestyle, a utopian lifestyle. When I say utopian lifestyle, I mean if we did live in a utopian society, what would you do with your time? What would you wake up in the morning and go? And I think spontaneity, in a utopian society, spontaneity would skyrocket, because you don't have all these things that you have to worry about. You don't have a 9-to-5 job to pay the bills. You can literally wake up and be what do I want to spend my time doing? What kind of, am I into art or sports or, whatever. You can wake up and do whatever you want. So I think just really asking yourself, what makes me happy? What am I into? What am I passionate about? And really kind of put a higher priority on that, and just make sure you're doing stuff that's,
Yeah, you're able to take more of your free time to kind of fulfill sort of your personal desires, assuming it's reached this point, and also you can contribute to society because you have more free time. That's, I feel, a little more beneficial.
Yeah, briefly. So, I think basically what you're talking about is just a shift in values, shift in core values. Right now, our idea of a successful life and a life on the edge is wealthy, whatever the hell, 10 homes all over the globe, which would be great. But you know what I mean? Kind of financial power and financial prowess, which are values that we have right now in our society. I think in this utopian thing we're talking about, what if our values were, oh shit, instead of planning my day around how I can make more money.
And we pause. Start to interview.
Are we still recording?
Oh yeah, it's been recording. Everything will
Hi.
I'm ready to get another beer while we're fucking around.
So, where I had this one note I wrote down here under the history of some proposed utopian societies, and the first one that came up was our good friend Plato, not Plato's Closet, but Plato, the philosopher, and in, I guess, his book, The Republic, he talks about he would create a caste system. This is interesting. He had a gold, a silver, and a bronze. I didn't read too far into it, but the big takeaway here is that the gold caste would be an educated caste that for 50 years, these people would be, I guess, conditioned and raised, and they would be benign oligarchs, and they would be, the term is philosopher kings. So I guess where I'm going with this is, and the question I want to ask is, philosophy is a big part of this. We've talked about that active engagement, and so I guess we need to change our philosophy a little bit?
Like as a society?
In order to, to reach those sort of utopian ideals.
I don't know. I mean, the podcast that I listened to before this podcast talked about Plato's Republic, and his idea of a utopia seemed a little fucked up to me. The caste system.
Pray tell.
There were slaves. They would pluck people out of the lower ranks if you had a drive. If you showed a drive to lead, and they would put you in the gold ranks. Yeah,
That's not utopia,
right? So I would want to maybe ruminate on that idea first before talking about standards, because
so I feel
I don't know
his
what to do with
philosopher
that.
king is someone, so not the other two castes, but his idea was this person who is going to be leading society has to be somewhat, I guess, reduced in a way as a person, to be able to have that greater awareness, make the best decisions for society. And so that's why he's they need, 50 years of education. And in my mind, it makes sense. Imagine if we had, I don't know, politicians who studied philosophy, what might happen to our system?
Right, I see what you're saying. What place does philosophy have in a greater society?
I guess I've never heard this theory before, so I've never heard about the slaves. That does sound pretty negative, though. Obviously, but
Pretty fucked up.
he was an oldie but goodie.
Classic radio.
Classic.
I guess this dovetails off of what I was saying before. Brent and Max both brought up this, and I saw that snowboarding video too. It's a really great video, all things aside, but it's pretty funny. But in our society today, we value, and it's just understood, in the Western world, and now even more in the Eastern world, that financial dominance and all these things that I think we don't even need to go through it. We all understand what things kind of define achievement and success. And those things aren't necessarily in line with ideal human psychology and empathy and social goodness, progress. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think there's definitely a call for a shift in value, a shift in philosophy, whatever. There'll have to be some kind of renaissance where we go through a period where we shift from valuing the things that we have been valuing, money, whatever you want to call it, and or it's more about dominance. I think it's more about dominance over more men. We've equated freedom with how much power do you have over other people, and it's money is sort of the currency that we use to communicate that power. And in this utopian world, I think things will have to be different than that, and we'll have to have values that are other than this concept of dominance over other men and more money and more power.
No money would probably be a utopian thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't really. Go ahead.
Oh, I think it's interesting, the whole artificial intelligence thing, and I kind of trip out on the fact that so many people go work these jobs where they're just glued to a computer screen, and maybe some people like that. Maybe some people enjoy computer coding, and they can maybe get into a flow state, doing their computer coding.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people don't want to go sit inside an office and be indoors typing on a computer, and I think it's just interesting that we've created all this technology because we thought it was going to create more leisure. We thought it was going to enhance the quality of our lives. In a lot of situations, it's actually done the opposite. So I think it's just up to each individual to kind of set your priorities and be like, all right, I'm not willing to sacrifice this, whatever it be, your health, your happiness, just so I can make X amount of money. So, those are the things that we have to deal with, in today's society. But in a utopian society, I think it's cool to think about, what if we had artificial intelligence to do all these jobs that people hate doing, and that everything was kind of automated, and we could just chill and go fucking surf.
Yeah.
Dude,
Totally,
for real.
man, totally.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You take the gold cast away, where they have to study for many years to become leaders and all of that stuff, and you also take away the lowest class, which is the slaves, the people who mop the floors or build our iPhones or what the hell ever, you take those away, and then you're left with the middle class. It's everyone's kind of on that same level. what has to happen for that to get there. There are fundamental elements of the human psyche. There's greed, there's lust, there's desire. All these things lead to negative emotions if you let them like run your life and make your decisions for you. That's the biggest thing that I think people don't respect emotions, because an emotion that you let run too long in your brain, it will make your decisions for you and literally run your life. That's your life. The decisions that you've made. So how do we change that? It's like ingrained into our brain. We've grown up with it for centuries, you know?
The idea of incorporating like artificial intelligence, that's like our technological future. It's like very close. It's like happening, but it's also what we're talking about, you know, eliminating these like lower class jobs could lead to bigger happiness. But I think something that we should consider is in past predictions of what future utopian societies would look like, a lot of the technology has come true. Like H.G. Wells described a radio, and he was like, there's going to be this like magical machine where you can pick any orchestra you want, and it's going to fill the room. And, you know, he had this like beautiful, elaborate description. And that's a radio. So, which is something we all take for granted, right? And always have. And, of course, it was a wonderful invention whenever it came out, like dissemination of information, yada, yada, yada. But what I'm getting at is that despite these advances in technology, we are still, if not more, a dissatisfied society and I don't know, just yeah. I think
society.
we might be a dystopian
We're
society.
headed there.
Exactly. So I think to get at your question, what do we need? What do we do? To get at your question of how does philosophy play into this? A big undercurrent that I've seen in this entire conversation is mindfulness, right? Being mindful of your flow state, how you feel best, being mindful of others in a more equal society, being mindful of maybe making self-sacrifices in a communist society, whatever it may be. And I think to me, that is the key to moving towards a utopian society. Because mindfulness is, you know, just having that self-actualization, self-awareness to be able to realize when maybe you're being kind of a shit person, you know? Yeah. And like that, a lot of people just coast and don't have that inner working or like don't have the thought to look inwards.
I think what it would take is it takes, you know, again, to be sort of big picture-ish, sorry, you know, yeah, so how do we, so my next question is going to dovetail on what you just said. How do we create situations and structures in our society where we can grow people up and raise our children and our next generations in societies where they are exposed to those kind of values, to where they grow up learning to be mindful and learn to be more conscious and understanding values, good human normal values, obviously, whatever. And so it's like, that would be what I'd be interested in. You know, it's like, how do we create schools? How do we change the education system where right now, all of our young people that are born go through this system, and it's kind of shitty, but at the same time, there's an infrastructure in place, and there's an expectation now that we've come to accept where our kids go to this 18-year-long system and they experience this education. So we already have this infrastructure in place. What if we injected it with, like, you know, new shit and totally renovated the system? You know, then we'd have a generation of kids, and then their generation of kids that would be cooked in this delicious oven of food. that is this utopian thing that we're talking. I mean, you know where I'm going with that. So that's a, you know, those are good thoughts, and I think we have a system in place, the education system that
probably should add a meditation class in the education system.
Dude,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
One of my notes here was my utopia, and I thought about this today before we got together, and I think the number one thing that came up for me was, you know, free higher education. Now that you just said that about Sam, about the, you know, we do need to take steps before higher education. It needs to be younger, you know, building awareness. So I guess my utopian society, the first thing I put on there was, you know, like a change to education. So I'm totally right there on the same page with you. We got to start teaching kids, you know, from a younger age about the history of mankind, not just the history of your nationalism. And I think if we can move the marker back on where we're starting the scope of human perception, by going further anthropologically backwards, kids are going to be like, oh, it's going to be eye-opening, like, rather than getting the same old, shitty whitewashed American history and then that affecting your mindset, they're going to be getting like, oh, so there were groups long before America and America wasn't the greatest before. And, like they're learning about these rises and falls more rather than like the instant gratification of American society right off the bat. So yeah, education for sure, my biggest priority if I were to have a utopian society.
But I would argue that we already do have a higher level education for free. We have the internet.
That's what I want to
buzzword.
If you want to learn how
Take it away.
change your oil, go to YouTube.
Amen,
If you want to
brother.
learn calculus, you ask Google. Literally you can ask the internet any question and it will solve your problems. It all comes to mindfulness. Like, what is your own drive, your own dedication to better yourself as a human being? I mean, there are hobos that have learned how to code. They had like a single shitty phone and they like looked it up and they stole the power from Subway, but they have jobs now as coders. It's insane. Like,
And
the only
that's a
excuse you
testament
have
to-
is yourself.
That's a testament to human ability to adapt. And
Exactly.
Just desire drives.
Exactly.
I do think it's important to say, just to recognize that, I guess you did address this. Some hobo might happen to have found a phone, but a lot of people don't have access based on their like socioeconomic state to basic things like internet.
The universalism of Wi-Fi is not everywhere yet, and it should be a free resource. I'm down for a free resource internet. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Facebook is working on that in
Yeah.
Africa right now.
I think it's proven that things like internet are it's not like water where there's a limited amount of it necessarily speaking, but it's like internet. It's like, what the hell is that? Nothing. It should be free. It should literally be completely available. So, pizza.
And I also wanted to add off of that and what Zach said earlier about the internet, how you can use it for everything. That could be kind of a part of that pressure, like feel pressured, but use that pressure for good. So maybe, I know people dive into like porn and like all these other random things. Oh, maybe I should buy this. Maybe I should buy this. And like you start falling in these like paths internet takes you on. But
We've all been there.
Oh my!
anyway,
We've all been there.
but
Thanks for tuning in today, guys, and listening to the BYOBand.org podcast. Make sure you go to our website at www.byoband.org and leave us a comment in the comment section. We love to hear what our listeners think. Take care, everyone.
BYOB.